Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Mayor, for the kind words, and thanks, Your Honor, for the help there. I'm not reserved back there. That's helpful. On behalf of the Philadelphia Bar Association and our 13,000 members, it was our distinct pleasure to help in our small way co-sponsor this evening and the discussion that is about to follow. The Bar Association is proud of the fact that its members hail from all segments of the practice. We have prosecutors, defense attorneys, members of the judiciary, and supporting attorneys in every phase of the criminal justice system, as well as civil practitioners. And we pride ourselves on being in the middle of discussions like this, where there are often very pointed points of view, often vast disagreements about how we get to certain problems and how we're going to get out of them. And so to serve as a resource in this discussion is a fabulous opportunity for us, and to be a part of this in a very, very small way compared to the hard work that's already been done. The Mayor has already done most of the gracious introductions, so as we say, I incorporate all the good things he said by reference in the interest of time, and I also cannot single out all of the important participants in this. But it does fall to me as the head of the bar to introduce the panelists for this evening's discussion, as well as our marquee moderator. In the order that I believe they have been seated, and I know some of these really do not need introduction, but I have been asked for the record to put some out there and to set the stage for the perspectives they will bring to this discussion early this evening. Everett Gillison is Philadelphia's Deputy Mayor for Public Safety, as noted. He previously served as an assistant defender at the Defender Association of Philadelphia for over 22 years and was appointed by the mayor for public safety in his public safety position in 2008. In his capacity, he oversees the police and fire departments, prisons, Office of Emergency Management, and the Mayor's Office of Reintegration Service for Ex-Offenders. Deputy Mayor Gillison will speak about what has caused the decline in the prison population over the last year and the city's agenda for the years ahead, in addition to whatever other perspectives he chooses to bring to this discussion. Next is Michael Jacobson, Director of the Vera Institute of Justice. The Vera Institute is a nonprofit institute in New York that assists jurisdictions across the country interested in improving the effectiveness, fairness, and efficiency of their criminal justice system through research, planning, and technical assistance. Mr. Jacobson holds, among other degrees and honors, a PhD in sociology and was professor at the City University of New York Graduate Center and the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. He taught courses in urban sociology, criminology, public policy and finance, corrections, and criminal justice policies and public administration. Mr. Jacobson is the former commissioner of both the New York City Department of Corrections and the Probation Department. He helped oversee the largest decline in the violence in the corrections system, in that system's history, and at the Vera Institute he has worked with a number of jurisdictions on issues similar to those facing Philadelphia. Next is our District Attorney Seth Williams, who was elected on November 3rd, 2009, and proudly the first African-American district attorney in the city's history, as well as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He previously served 10 years in the office he now leads, and as an assistant district attorney, he served as assistant chief of the municipal court. He also created and led the Repeat Offenders Unit, a unit established to reduce the high percentage of crimes committed by repeat offenders. District Attorney Williams has an ambitious reform agenda that has implications for the entire prison population. He will talk about recent changes in his office, planned changes ahead, and the repercussions for public safety and the prison population. Last on the panel, to my right, Reverend Dr. Ernest McNair is co-founder of the True Gospel Tabernacle Church and president of the Community Connection Services and Developments, which operates the Kingdom Care Reentry Network and the program that the mayor previously mentioned. Kingdom Care Reentry Network is an organization that provides mentorships and support to individuals and their families touched by incarceration. Kingdom Care's work includes programming within the prisons, assistance for individuals reentering the community after a period of incarceration, and helping individuals facing bench warrants and violations of probation. Reverend Dr. McNair is also director and principal of True Gospel Tabernacle Learning Center and president of the True Gospel Tabernacle Institute of Bible and Ministry. As noted before, in addition to these panelists, other members who have direct bearing on this discussion are in our audience and I believe will participate in the discussion as we move forward. And I would be remiss as an officer of the court if I do not point out our justice and members of the judiciary and the courts both that I appear in, as do our members, and thank them and the other public servants for participating in this important public dialogue. It last falls to me to introduce the last individual who also needs no introduction and is probably one of the most widely known in this room, and that's Tamala Edwards, who is our anchor and an anchor here and our moderator for this evening. Her full-time job currently is to be a news anchor at 6 ABC Action News, but has held a number of high-profile positions in major journalism. Ms. Edwards anchors the morning edition of Action News and has also reported for Action News, specializing in education and political coverage. Prior to joining Action News locally, Ms. Edwards was anchor of ABC's World News Now and World News This Morning. She also served as ABC's correspondent based in Washington, D.C., and before on-camera work was a print journalist for Time magazine. As someone who has moderated mayoral debates and served as a questioner in presidential primary debates, we are honored to have her serve as our moderator to move this important discussion forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask that you join me in welcoming and thanking for their time all of our participants and our moderator, and thank you for this discussion.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here, and among many things, I am the mother of a small child, and I get up at 2:30 a.m. It's a sign of how important I thought this was and how impressed I was with Pew and the report and with this panel that I wanted to be here tonight. And a word on how we will proceed. You will find that there's a way for you to write questions. At some point in the evening, I will direct you to pass those questions down to the end of the row. We'll go through them and try to get to as many of them as we can, starting about midway through. But for now, I'm going to try to kick this off and go through the panelists and ask them questions on a variety of topics. Let's get started talking a little bit about the panel, and I'll start with you, Mr. Gillison. As it's been noted, the population has declined. The city has saved $9 million. That's good news. But the question becomes, why did this happen? Was it the change in the rules that said if you're in jail longer than 2 years, you go to a state facility, or was it something else? As well, do you expect, and in what time frame, that this trend could continue forward to the point that you could actually close another jail facility?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I will say that it has been a combination of a lot of very, very good things happening at the same time. I will say that the legacy and the forethought of the District Attorney's Office in helping pass that legislation to get and provide for the state, basically state sentenced prisoners that are in the counties to be taken to the to state facilities, that freed up about 300 people. But if you've noticed, we've already gotten rid of about 1,000 or more. So it wasn't just that, but that provided a springboard. I think that the biggest thing that happened is that we all came to the table, and it became less a discussion about the prisons are overcrowded, but it became an issue for the criminal justice stakeholders saying, what can we do together to handle the issue? And I think that the collaboration cannot be understated. When I look at the prisons commissioner, and when I met Lou and told him that we're going to have the issue, and I said that I've been around long enough to remember almost the first time that the city was sued, I said that I'd really like to have those suits stop, and we can achieve a decrease if we just talk to each other and be able to actually motivate one another to help with this problem. And he said, Deputy Mayor, if we can do that, people won't believe the fact that we could actually do some positive things that I know that you're interested in, which is reentry, making sure that people stay out of jail. We have a great police commissioner that keeps locking up the same people over and over again because we provide no alternatives. Alternatives to incarceration work. They have always worked. We just haven't invested in them the way we should have. But the collaboration that we brought to the table, the mayor was able to run on getting the fact that CJAB was going to get started in Philadelphia. It was started. We ended up starting the whole process of talking together, and we worked on getting a prison subcommittee that actually said, what can all of us bring to the table to do it? And we put in very innovative programs. The First Judicial District turned around and said, you know, we could actually use some of the technology that is up there, and we can get that and advance that. We can actually change some of the ways that probation is done so we don't keep people locked up waiting another month for someone to see them when in essence we're going to let them out in that month. So it was a variety of things that happened. It wasn't just one particular matter, but I will say that if I had to bet on it, it was the fact that we all sat around the table, we took our jobs seriously, we respected one another's responsibilities, and we worked together, and I think that the proof is in the pudding. So that's where I think then that's how we got here.
Will you be closing another jail sometime soon?
Oh, my goodness. One of the things that I've said from day one is that I will, and the Prisons Commissioner will also attest to it, and City Council will attest to it as well. I said that we will end up destroying the House of Corrections. I just need 1,000 more people to get out, and I know how to get there. And I will be the one probably raising money by selling tickets so that we'll be able to say who wants to push the button to blow it up. The prison was built back in the 1800s. There are too many, because of the design of the prison, we have to expend a lot more by way of guards than we really need because of the kind of services and that we have to provide there and safety. The answer is yes, we will be able to get there, but we will not get there with just one body working alone. We will get there as a criminal justice stakeholder community saying that we can take this down responsibly and safely, and we can get to that point. I'm looking forward to it happening. If we can have another year that we've had today, this year or the past year, let's get another year. Let's keep the sustainability going. And yes, I hope that, shall I say, in the next term, we'll be able to achieve that goal.
Now let's go on to Mr. Jacobson. You've run New York's correctional facility, and you're doing work with correctional facilities across the country. If you had to pick two reforms that you see in place elsewhere that Philadelphia should jump on, what would they be?
Well, I'll do 2.5 maybe. The thing that jumps out at you, I guess, from the report, and is one of the areas highlighted, is the use of release on recognizance, right? The entire pretrial issue. When you look at Philadelphia and you compared it to Washington, D.C. and New York, Philadelphia relies far too heavily on money bond, right? And you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that for a variety of reasons. First of all, it's already a punishment. It's not particularly just, and it's not effective. There's no research that says setting money bond guarantees people coming back any more than releasing them on recognizance, and there's all sorts of ways through research and empirically based instruments to target people who can be safely released and will come back to court on their appearances, just like the folks in this room would come back to court if they were asked to come back to court. So you have too high a use of bail, not enough targeted release on recognizance, and that 40% rate that you have should go up substantially. And one of the reasons you want to do that, there are justice reasons, as I said, there are efficiency reasons, obviously financial reasons, but one of the main reasons you want to do that is all the research that exists in the field now will say, if you over-punish people, if you over-incarcerate, if you use jail for people who could otherwise be handled safely in the community, you will turn them into public safety problems. If you take low-risk folks, take them away from their communities, from their families, from their jobs, and keep them in jail, you will turn someone who is not a public safety risk into a public safety risk. Right. And right now, you are buying yourself a public safety risk, and you just don't want to do that. So that's one. The other sort of obvious one is this issue with technical parole and probation violators. As far as I can tell from the report, you have roughly about 1,600 of your 8,500 or so beds taken up by those technical violators. That is far, far too high a proportion. You should never have a jail that has that many technical parole and probation violators in it. This is not just a Philadelphia problem. This is a national problem. This is not just an issue for this city. That happens for several reasons. Mostly it happens because states and counties believe that they can sort of resource starve probation and parole agencies, which happen to be the most underfunded agencies in the system. You can never starve them of resources. You can starve those agencies of resources, but they will spend your money in jails and prisons because if you don't give those agencies the resources they need, And since you can't ask them to ignore violations of probation and parole, and everyone violates probation and parole, if you give them no other options other to jump to the most punitive, expensive sanction you have, which is jail and prison, they will put them in jail and prison. If you give them other alternatives, they will use other alternatives. You have far too many people coming in for those violations, and they stay far too long. 70 to 80 days to process a parole and probation violation is too long. It should easily be cut in half. Those two things, if you made significant reforms just in those two areas, you could save thousands of jail beds.
When you say there are other things you can do, are you talking about electronic monitoring, weekend service, day centers? Give specifics to what they should be doing instead.
Well, before you even get to that point, there's the issue, again, going back to the research on low-risk, low-needs folks. What probation, and I don't know the Pennsylvania or Philadelphia system enough to sort of comment on what exactly they're doing, but the trend is usually for those systems, probation and parole, to over-supervise people who are low risk and low needs. If you're low risk and low needs, you don't need to be supervised a lot. You really don't need to be supervised at all. The more you supervise them, the more you require of them, the worse you will make them, the more you will catch them, the more you will put them in jail or prison. So there should be very different levels for folks who present low risk and low needs, and there's a lot of them. Then the issue is, what do you do when people violate? Because people violate all the time. If you look at who's coming out of jail and state prisons and their sort of mental health issues, their drug abuse issues, their levels of education, and then compare that with the requirements of probation and parole to report regularly, to have a regular address, to have a job, to be drug-free, of course they're going to violate. But you have to be nuanced in how you respond to those violations. You can't ignore them, but if it's a violation around drug use, then you should think around drug treatment. If there are employment issues, then you should think about job training and job treatment. Or if you want to talk about supervision and monitoring, electronic monitoring, house arrest, there are all sorts of things you can do. There should be a system of graduated sanctions for most of these folks before you jump right to incarceration. It's a waste of resources. You take resources away from other things that could work for public safety, and for a lot of those folks, you will make them worse than they were before you did that.
Okay. Let's go on to DA Williams. You've talked about changing the charging unit to go from focusing on probable cause to reasonable doubt, keeping people out of a holding cell unless you really think you're going to get a conviction at a later stage. A Pew poll found that crime is the #1 concern among voters in the city. A Philadelphia Inquirer story from last December found that out of 31,000 cases between 2006 and 2008, defendants went free in 2/3 of violent crime cases. You might imagine readers and voters, that gets their attention. If you were to change how cases are charged, how do you answer the worry that now people who would have been locked up will get out, not because they didn't do something, but because there was a weak case? The attorney said, well, I don't think we can really go anywhere on this. How do you assure them that changing the charging unit is the right direction?
All right. Well, I think most people don't understand. And the mayor was here, and he was talking about Law and Order and the show coming to an end. And when I go out and talk to children in schools or groups, I ask them, how many of them have ever seen the TV show Law and Order? Everybody puts their hand up. I say, well, how does this show begin? And then some people try to mimic it, and it says, in the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate and distinct entities: the police and the detectives that investigate crimes, and the assistant district attorneys that prosecute them. These are their stories. Dun, dun, dun. So I explain to people that the first half hour is what the police do, and the detectives. And the second half hour is what the prosecutors do, and the defense attorneys, and the judges, and what goes on in court. And so people have to understand that entire hour and understand the entire process. So when you talk about charging, and we talk about the prisons and the prison population, I really don't think the public cares if the prison population goes up or down. The public wants to be safe. The public wants to have less violence. That's what the public wants. But I think for too long they've been told the only way to be safe is for us to be tough on crime. And the only way for us to be tough, they've been told, is for us to send more and more people to jail for longer and longer and longer. Where I think the reality is that we have to be smart on crime. That anybody can say, let's be tough. My 6-year-old daughter running for class president for kindergarten should say, let's be tough on crime. You steal a graham cracker, timeout. And she probably would win the class presidency. But we have to be smart on crime. Why are the kids stealing the graham crackers? What can we do? Right? And so the same is true, I think, with the criminal justice system. And for too long, you talked about my own career. I was a prosecutor trying cases every day. And our mantra was, get all cases ready, try all ready cases. I would go to court with one of my best friends, Elton Anglada, who was a public defender. We'd square off every day and fight. And then afterwards, we'd go out and have drinks. We were good friends. But we weren't really thinking about the big picture of the cases and why. And that really only happened for me when I became the chief of the repeat offenders unit. I began seeing the patterns in crime, and that 5% of the people commit 60% of the crimes in Philadelphia. That 59% of all the felony cases get dismissed for lack of prosecution because the cases weren't ready at the preliminary hearing. That Philadelphia leads the nation in the rate of homicides caused by handguns. That the #1 cause of death for black men under 35 is homicide. So for all those reasons, I said, this just talking tough isn't working. We have to be smarter on crime. And your question most specifically as to charging, the DA is responsible for what are the charges? Who's going to be charged? And historically in Philadelphia, we were sending people to be in the charging unit that had demonstrated bad judgment. Maybe they danced too close with the boss's wife at the Christmas party, so they got sent to the charging unit, which really is where we should send people who have demonstrated good judgment. We can't abdicate our responsibility to the judges in municipal court to determine, well, what really happened? That is the responsibility through the ethics we learned in law school. That's the responsibility of the prosecutor. So I took a unit that had 5 people in the charging unit, the DAs that review the charges, and we have 18 people now. Really trying to figure out what happened. I visited the DA in San Diego, and there, 75% of all of the cases result in negotiated guilty pleas before the preliminary hearings. I said, well, how is that possible? They said, well, we only charge people with crimes that we believe are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, which was something we've never heard of here. And really, that's our role, to charge people, the right people, with just the right crimes. And that's what we're going to do now. So we're not going to abdicate that responsibility to the judges. So that's where I think it all starts, in the charging unit. And we've totally revamped what we're going to be doing in the charging unit.
Let's go on to Reverend McNair. And Reverend McNair, you've worked with a lot of people who've been through the system, people in communities who have been victimized a lot by crime. You see a lot of different perspectives on this. What is your sense of who belongs and does not belong in the jail system?
Thank you. Good evening. And I want to thank Pew for this fine report and for this panel and this discussion. I remember just not too long ago, I believe it was 2008, there was another report by Pew. And it was a very alarming report because it really highlighted mass incarceration. Highlighted it to the point where we've seen that there were 1 in 100 Americans in jail. Then I think there was also maybe 1 in 39 white men. And then I read where it was 1 in 9 African Americans in jail. And then when this report came out, it seemed like it lined up with it. It was good news because the population of inmates had leveled off. And it went down from over 9,700 to somewhere around 8,300 or so. However, that is still way above the population that we should have. I think that the jails commission was supposed to hold about 6,500, something like that, somewhere around there. So we're really way up there. And I think we're up there in mass incarceration area, and we do care who's in jail, and we do care about that because the people that are in jail, a lot of them that I'm going to tell you, but that shouldn't be in there, they have families. And so their families are in jail. And then if they had a job, they lost their job. And then many of them that's spending just a few days there, they lose their jobs, they might lose their homes. So how do we approach this? I think it begins by our mindset. I think that all of the stakeholders, we need to kind of have a paradigm shift in our mindset of doing criminal justice. This report really was driven by cost. It seems like money is the big issue here, not people. And those that are in this inmate population are really people. They're people with families and they're people with lives, and I think that's what we should be driven by, and trying to build up the citizenship and bring them to a place where they can truly be productive citizens. So who should be in there, who shouldn't be in there? Well, I'll leave that to President Judge and the First Judicial System in terms of who's guilty or not. However, everyone that's in there should get a chance to come out because they're coming home and to make a difference. But we can do some things in terms of programming that will really involve the community. So what happens a lot of times is when the person is recidivating, the family's recidivating, the whole community is recidivating. By the way, mass incarceration really tears down that particular community. Everyone, I read the demographics in this report, and they did it by race, they did it by gender, they did it by the seriousness of the crimes, they did it by certain things, but they did not do it by geographical area. And you can go into the city of Philadelphia, in certain parts of North Philly, South Philly, West Philly, that's where all of your inmates, or the majority, I should say, are coming from. So we should have programs that will not only help those that are coming home, but that will kind of take a closer look at those who may be picked up for violations of probation and parole, that have a job, haven't had any problems, and there's a small violation. That's one thing. And then also we should be able to look at some of the other ones who are really haven't really been in a lot of trouble. One other thing is that it's sad that our criminal justice system, as great as it is, great people, if you're arrested for a felony or any arrest and found guilty, that's always on your record.
A lot to get into, and we'll keep going back to some of your points. I want to remind people in the crowd about now, if you've been writing down questions, start sending them to the end of the aisles. We'll collect them, and in about 10 minutes, we'll turn to audience questions. Mr. Gillison, I want to go back to you and raise some of the things that the good minister raised, which is, let's say, and you talked about it as well, programs within the community. I think you've advocated day centers, other things that could be done to help people to keep them out of the system. A lot of this report was generated by the cost. We don't have the money. If you do replace these things, that's going to cost money. Will we actually have cost savings, or will we just be putting the money somewhere else, maybe somewhere better, but don't look for a lot of savings?
No, I think that you'll end up having savings if we are able to address the underlying issue. Remember one thing about the city of Philadelphia, and I have to expose one of the things. Look, we have for some reason, there's a violent city. So we're not talking about dealing with the violent part of them. We're going to keep the people that need to be locked up. They're going to get locked up. The question is that we're spending a whole lot of money on people that don't need to be locked up. And that's where we're going to get our savings from. If we just target that, I agree totally with the district attorney. If you target the people that really need to be there, the same with Mr. Jacobson. If you look at it and say that we can invest the savings is going to be from just saying those that we don't have to put in jail, we can actually provide a different way at a cheaper amount of money. And as a result, the city can actually invest in making sure that the true cost of trying to address the problems gets handled. That's where the savings is going to be. And those savings are real. I mean, we ended up this year canceling 2 or 3 contracts that cost us somewhere around $4.5 million. We took a savings that I would have loved to have held on to and then built the day reporting centers that everybody right now is telling me the communities don't want. Well, the communities, when I go out and talk to them, they do want them. It's the fact that we have this fear that we have to address. And I think it's leadership's responsibility to meet the people where they are, describe what needs to be done. They want it to happen in their communities. But what they don't want is to be told this is going to happen whether you like it or not. So leaders have to lead. We have to tell people that we can lower the cost, but there's a benefit of working with each other to get this thing done. That's what we're going to have to do.
Mr. District Attorney, I know you want to touch on that point, and continuing with the pretrial population, when he was giving the figures, he pointed out that some of the arrest or crackdowns increase had come from people who had drug, DUI, firearm charges, and they end up in the pretrial population. You've talked about cracking down on people with firearms. How do you reduce that population? Do you have looser standards on people caught with these things? What do you do?
Right. Well, I was going to say, I might be one of the lone voices here, but I mean, I believe some people have to be in prison.
Of course.
The question is, we have to have the right people in prison, both because they committed a crime, but also because prison is a place for them. Okay? So there are some people, I believe, and I really want to commend Pew, and I want to commend the Inquirer for their studies and their research, because we have to make these decisions, these policy decisions, based on evidence, based on facts, based on real statistics, not just anecdotal, oh, this has been working great for all these years, and it hasn't. And so I think we have to have the right people in prison, and by that I mean we have to have people that are violent, and nonviolent people, and people who statistics show most likely will not be recidivist, and because of the types of crimes they've committed, we can find alternatives that help them to cure them, if you will, or to find the way. Again, it's not the severity of punishment that changes behavior, it's the certainty.
Yep.
So we have to have the right people incarcerated. The other people have to get the services that they need so they don't become repeat offenders. And that's what we have to do. And I think as a result of these studies, now we have tremendous collaboration with the courts, with Justice McCaffrey and Chief Justice Castile, the judges, Judge Denby, Judge Neifeld. We're all sitting together, the deputy mayor, the prison commissioner, coming together to talk about Ellen Greenlee, to try to really find some solutions. And I think that's what's going to really help us so that we can put people in jail that are violent. Bishop McNair was talking about the percentage of Americans that have been incarcerated. That number was like a flat line from like the 1780s until 1970. And then the number and percentage of Americans that are incarcerated has gone through the roof. We have 7 times the number of Pennsylvanians incarcerated today than we did 30 years ago. But we're not 7 times safer. We're just putting all these people in jail that sold very small amounts of narcotics. We give them felony convictions. Now when they come home from prison, they were nonviolent. They come home, they're violent now, and they can't get a job. It's like an economic death sentence having the felony conviction. So I want to ensure that we give felony convictions to the right people, that they get a nice time out, that we can change their behavior, but most importantly for those that are nonviolent, people who had not bad guys but had a bad day, or made some bad economic decision. They think they're going to be like the guys on Miami Vice and become millionaires selling crack. Where most likely, the people most likely to be shot and those most likely to go to jail are making about $8 an hour. They can make more money if they went to a ShopRite and bought a case of water and sold each bottle for $1. So to those that are nonviolent, to get them the help they need so they don't become repeat offenders.
I want to go back to you, Mr. Jacobson. You talked a little bit about parole, probation violators. Many of the things that are being done aren't helping them, they're making it worse. One question I had as I read everything was about the culture, though, in Philadelphia, where you pay your bond, you have no intention of ever coming back. It's generational. People have one way of looking at the system. If you make all these changes, can you change the culture? And how people respect whether or not they need to show up for court dates, check in with their parole probation officer?
Well, I mean, it's a really good question. I think there's a couple of ways to answer that. You know, people tend to have respect for criminal justice systems when they believe they're fair and legitimate, right? It's a very important part of how citizens should think about their criminal justice system. And again, this is not a particularly Philadelphia-specific issue, but it's not unusual for communities to not have faith in their systems, to think they're unfair, to think they're overused. But I think one of the ways, because I think somewhere in the report it said the failure to appear rate was something like 30%, or it was something like that, I remember, which is high. But I have to believe one of the reasons for that is that, you know, you're not, when you use the most sort of up-to-date research, right, and you have thousands of cases here of people who do come back, right? And you can do research which shows that when people have significant both ties to their community, work in their community, are grounded in their community, don't have a serious charge, right? Most of those folks will come back. You want to target them correctly, right? Because there are costs to not to not coming back. And research shows right across the country, right, 50 years ago, hardly anyone used release on recognizance because people thought, well, of course, no one will come, why would you come back? But they do come back, and they come back in incredibly high numbers if you don't sort of force them into jail and keep them out. So I think, A, you can get more people out just by using, sort of very, very intensive risk-based and empirically based instruments. And I think, too, the more you do that, the more respect people will have for the system. And that also goes to the culture issue.
All right, it's just about time to turn to the audience questions. I have a quick one for Reverend McNair, and as the granddaughter of 2 Baptist ministers, I know that quick is tough, but I'll ask you to try. Day centers, which has been brought up. It was sort of surprising to me to read that there was a lot of backlash in the community. You would think that people like the idea of something where dad, mom could easily go, check in, do whatever they need to do, come back home. Why is there a pushback against this?
That's a good question, and you find that there's pushback mainly because, generally speaking, in an urban setting like this and in this kind of culture when there is mass incarceration and when it seems to be a particular population that is suffering the punitive justice that we're prioritizing, it seems as though there's an adversarial relationship between the citizens and the government agencies and so forth. So when, as Deputy Mayor Everett Gillison said, that when you come and tell people what they need, instead of including them and trying to solve their problems, having them at the table to, even though you may have some ideas, but what we've done, Kingdom Care Reentry Network, as well as our partners, what we've done for the last 2 years, we've formulated something called the Support Center for Prison Advocacy, where we go into each neighborhood. We're going to do one this Saturday, a speak out, and we have people just coming out that have been affected by the system some way or another, and we're listening to them, asking them what do they need. Mothers with children, grandparents, with loved ones in jail, and so forth. And we're just hearing them, and we're discovering that they need housing. They do want to be safe. They do want to have jobs. But now they're ready to address this issue. And I think that's what we need to do instead of just coming in and say, look, I got this great idea, and we're going to have a day reporting. You have to include the citizens.
All right, let's turn to the audience questions, and I want to remind you that you can also ask questions of Judge Dimby, Ellen Greenlee, Commissioner Jorla, and Lieutenant Francis Healy from the Police Department. And in fact, our first question is going to go to you, Commissioner Jorla. What is the most important aspect about how incarceration is used in Philadelphia that the general public fails to understand?
I think what the public fails to understand is the fact that incarceration doesn't change the individual necessarily. It delays their connection with the community. It interferes with their opportunity to maintain contact with their family. And it also it removes them from a lot of responsibility. Believe it or not, it's an artificial environment where you're not really held responsible for your actions. You're meant to comply, you're meant to follow orders, but you're not held responsible. Nobody says you have to have a job by a certain date. Nobody says you have to achieve milestones by a certain date. It really delays development and delays reform.
And speaking of delaying development, Mr. Gillison, this question comes to you from Ted McKee from the U.S. Courts, and he says, does moving people from county to state facilities reduce the city population create a future recidivist who may not have become one had he stayed within that county population?
The answer is probably yes, but I will, because we don't have the kind of ability to provide the programs that the state actually does have the ability to provide. They have a program that has been underutilized, unfortunately, which was the program to get people, I think it was in the boot camp situation, and a lot of the people that were getting the 2 to 5s or the 2 to 5s minus 1 day should have been taking advantage of the shorter term state programs. We don't have the ability to handle those kind of folks for long period of times in the county jail. This is one of those areas where the success that I had as a defender in making sure that my clients stayed closer to home worked against them in the long run, and that's something I had to learn in the position that I'm in now, that as a matter of fact, I was actually hurting them rather than getting them in and out of the jails faster. So I'm now trying to make sure that we get them into the place where they need to be, that we work with the judges. One of the things that I enjoyed saying is that at CJAB, when we actually brought this up and looked at the days that we were actually spending and what was happening in the Philadelphia system, the judges adopted and they stopped actually sending people pretty much on their own. It wasn't even as a result of the thing that was coming, because it was only a couple of years from now. The judges almost stopped and reduce the amount of time that they're sending people to those areas, and actually are reducing the 2 to 5s down to almost 1 to 2s and sending people to the boot camps. So we've had a change in culture that I'm looking forward to seeing what the effect is going to be as we go further.
The next question is for DA Williams, and it goes to something in the report that talks about bail guidelines, which pointed out that for whatever was set currently, there seems to be higher bail set, no bail set, and wondering what that does. And this question asks, what is the role in your office of changing bail setting decisions? Do you have any ability to affect that?
Well, we don't set the bail. The bail guidelines exist. They were modified, I think, in about 1995. Previous to that, it was in maybe the 70s. So it's something that's dynamic, it's not static, and we have to revisit it. I think that there are some of the bail guidelines are so that the people that determine what the bail should be basically look at a couple of, you got one column, this column, and you see where the defendant fits, and that's what the bail should be. But some of the questions that people ask are things that we need to try to modify now. They ask them, if you don't have a phone at your residence, that's one thing that is more indicative, maybe you should have a higher bail. Well, there isn't a question about, do you have a cell phone? A lot of people don't even have phones at their residence, and that'd be what they do, have a cell phone. One of the questions they ask, if the person doesn't have 10 failures to appear, if you have to have 10 FTAs or more, and then maybe you'll get a higher bail. Well, I think if you failed to appear 3 times, that's enough to say that maybe we should look at that. So I think we do need to reevaluate pretrial, those that are going to be incarcerated pretrial, but also using alternatives to pretrial, like day reporting, different types of electronic monitoring, even for people who maybe have longer sentences for maybe DUIs. We have monitors where they can stay at home and we see if they're drinking or not. So I think these types of studies and the fact that all of government is broke right now is bringing us all to the table to try to find ways to reduce crime, reduce recidivism, and as good stewards of the public, save money.
One thing I would want to add is that the startling thing was not really startling to me, because having lived with it for most of my time, but at least it was now put in paper, where you have bail guidelines that the report says are ignored in 50% of the cases. That indicates we've got a problem. And we've known about this in the criminal justice area for at least 30 years, but going back and forth when the guidelines weren't, when they first came on the board back in the 80s, I believe it was, when they first came out, and then there's been a couple of different attempts to try to modify them along the way. But at least now we have a report that says the guidelines that you're using right now are ignored in 50% of the time. And so if you want to get buy-in, then we have to at least, that's a good place for us to begin and say, let's look at what everybody else is doing. We can get people to come to court, and if we don't have to give them a bail to get them to come to court, I think that helps all of us achieve what we're trying to achieve. And that's what I'm hoping we'll begin that issue about that. This is going to be very good in jump-starting that discussion.
The next question is about what initiatives are in place or planned besides mental health court to direct people who are mentally ill out of the criminal justice system. It's directed to Mr. Gillison, but I'd also like to hear from Mr. Jacobson, because you had quite a record in New York in terms of moving those cases out of the criminal justice system. So whoever wants to start.
I'll start. I will continue to tell people that despite what you may have read, the Philadelphia court system is an innovator and has been a model for innovation for the past at least 20, 25 years. We were the first with drug court. We were the first with that has been and won national praise. We have done this new mental health court as an innovation. We're now doing a veterans court consistent with the Justice McCaffrey's initiative and the courts and everyone working together. We know that these problem-solving courts work. They work because they anticipate that people will fail, but if you support them, they will succeed. So we've been doing that and have expanded. I think that day reporting is going to be something that we will do. We will actually come together with the right protocols. I think the district attorney's idea of charging people in a way that will give them an opportunity to get rid of the case before they even have to get an arrest. I think that's going to take, hopefully, the 2,000 to 3,000 to 4,000 people that we are analyzing marijuana in our criminalistics lab. 1/3 of the police time is currently spent in criminalistics analyzing marijuana. I mean, the waste of resources is so great, and yet we can address all of these things in simple ways. And I think that with the district attorney, with the justice, with the president, judge, and all of us working together, we're actually going forward and dealing with it in that way. So those are some of the things that are coming.
Mr. Jacobson?
Yeah, you know, the mental health issue is an issue that vexes every jail and prison system in the country. In fact, the two largest mental health facilities in the United States are the New York City jail system and the Los Angeles jail system. And those systems are not set up, jail systems are not set up to handle folks with mental health issues, right? They're, in fact, jails and prisons make you crazy, right? So you don't really want to have high levels of mental illness when you come in. There's really no, and that mental health courts are a really interesting innovation. I think they're really important. The issue with them is, from my opinion, they can't be taken up to scale enough to deal with just the volume and severity of the problem. And so you have to think of ways to divert a lot of those folks from jail in the first place. And across the country, the trend has been, we've closed our community-based mental health facilities, and especially with aggressive public order policing, those are the folks who commit public order crimes. They get swept up into the criminal justice system. They wind up in jails and prisons, and again, they usually get worse when they come out. So the long-term fix, and it's difficult. This is not easy stuff, is to build community-based capacity to divert a lot of these folks from places that were never, are not able to, and will never be able to handle the volume of folks with serious mental illness that these systems find themselves with. It makes the prison and jail administrators' jobs just exceptionally difficult.
The next question from the audience is about the collaboration between community organizations like churches and the effort to bring down the number of people in jails. Reverend McNair, how could you see religious institutions, beyond what they're already doing, and they're doing a lot, how else could they be used to fight this problem?
Yes, well, one of the things that I want to I really agree with the district attorney with is that he's going to bring down the charge of marijuana to a summary charges and so forth, and that will help pretrial, bring down the pretrial population big time. But it's very important that we include the community and organizations that are committed and capable to address these issues. When we were able, Kingdom Care Reentry Network, with a host of other partners such as Philadelphia Fight and FER and the Institute for Civic Values and others, we were able to do fugitive safe surrender because there was a collaboration and cooperation, and we brought together partners that included all of the First Judicial System district, and all of our government agencies with the community. And as a result, we saw nearly 1,300 people warrants lifted. And they keep coming to the church because it's a safe place. It's a place where they trust it. So therefore, when we say that we're going to do this as a church or as a community-based organizations, and we're going to take care of your legal issues, people come and they trust it, and then we build a bridge, building a bridge between those that service us as political leaders and public servants and those who have come in contact with the law. By the way, the law is for the lawless. Some people will be in jail, and they have to be there, but when they're in there, they should be treated humanely. And we still have to service them some kind of way. And many of them are coming out, and so they need to have programming from the community, a welcoming community, something that will have a moral transformation. That's the only thing that really changes your behavior. You have to be transformed morally. Punitive justice should be transformed to, our approach should be more of reparative or restorative justice approach, because these people are coming home and they are the people that we serve. They are our neighbors and co-workers. And so if we could include the community organizations and people that are committed to this criminal justice issue, excuse me, I think that we can really make a big difference.
Yes.
I want to jump in there too. My job as a DA is public safety. It's to hire great lawyers that are going to prosecute cases that put bad people away. But I also recognize that preventing crime is equal or more important than prosecuting crime. So what I'm going to ask you and the clergy, we're going to try and create real partnerships with the clergy. I'm going to ask them, because I can't do it. I understand we have to understand the connection between economic development, public health, public safety, and education, but I can't be all those other people. My job is to be the DA. But I need you, we're going to create a partnership. So what I've recognized, what I've come to learn, is that the number one thing people have in common that get arrested in Philadelphia is that they didn't finish high school.
That's right.
50% of all the public school students in Philadelphia drop out. So I can't be Dr. Ackerman, but I'm going to create partnerships with the clergy, with DHS, with the schools, and ask you to help me keep kids in school. Ask you to help me teach kids better ways of conflict resolution. And I think that is the role for the clergy. And that's the role I'm trying to help, in addition to praying for me every day.
You got it.
That is what I think together, working together, would help us.
And I think that's excellent, and that's something that we really want to do and that we're doing. Matter of fact, when we talk about the population that we have, that's this excessive population, inmate population, we need to understand that right now we're addressing those same issues, that because 70% of those inmates have not gotten a high school education. Many of the inmates have children, and most of the charges are drug-related some way or another. So right now, Kingdom Care Reentry Network, in partnership with JABS, we are operating what is called Successful Preparation for Reintegration. We are inside the jails, and we're dealing with the population there that's been sentenced and coming out soon. And what we do is we prepare them. We have reentry plans. We have self-assessment. And then after that program ends inside, they already have a mentor that will meet them at the door, and we walk with them for the next year.
But I would imagine a key thing that people need when they come out that causes them to go back to crime is a job.
That's correct.
And so I want to turn to Mr. Jacobson. You really reduced the population in New York City jails, New York State jails. How did you address that issue? Those inmates, did they magically find jobs in New York State? What did you do to keep them from coming back?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know that I did it, but I'm in Philadelphia, so I'll take credit for it. Right. I mean, there's two basic issues with people who leave both jail and prisons, and again, as I said, the needs are enormous. But essentially, it's sobriety and work. Right. Those are the big issues, and you have to do both. We've been lucky in New York City because for the most part, it's a pretty well resourced place. And different mayors have been willing to invest resources, especially in both in and out of prison work and vocational programs. And the city has one program, which is actually a spin-off from Vera, called the Center for Employment Opportunities, that does supported work and job placement. That's probably the largest program of its kind in the country. And research shows again and again, and for that program, it's currently in the middle of or toward the end of a 3-year big sort of random assignment evaluation, that people who go to that program who get placed in jobs have significantly less recidivism. Right? It's intuitive, and none of it's particularly surprising. It's not cheap. It's just a lot cheaper than jail or prison. And so that, the challenge is, we know it works, right? This is a field generally where there's been a disconnect between what we know works and what we do. We generally do what we know doesn't work, because it's just a very political field. And the trick is to find ways to invest in those programs, especially when money is scarce. It's very difficult. But in some ways, you can look at both jails and prisons as sort of it's sort of a big bank. And if you can shrink the size of them, you can pop up money. Even marginal dollars in those systems are large, and you can sort of reinvest those monies in programs like that. It's not easy to do. It's easy to talk about. It doesn't sound particularly difficult. It's hard. It's tough stuff. But the trick is to not invest your money in things that you know don't work, and invest them in things like employment programs, like certain kinds of targeted drug treatment. It takes will. It certainly seems like the will and the leadership is here. And that's how, again, in these gigantic systems, even when you start to make small differences, you affect thousands of people's lives.
Yeah. Me personally, if you shoot people, if you rape people, if you're walking around Philadelphia with a gun, I want to put you in jail. But what I think we have a lot of people that we're putting in jail that we could find alternative ways that would reduce recidivism and also make the city safer. So I want to replicate a program. I'm working right now to create a partnership with private public ventures and another organization I hope is going to help fund us, since we don't have it from the city yet. But to create a program called Back on Track that works in San Francisco, where you take first-time nonviolent drug dealers, people who've sold in Philadelphia about 2 packets worth of sugar. You go to jail for at least a year. And it costs about $40,000 a year to incarcerate them. And we have about a 73% recidivism rate. So about 73% of the people that we're spending the $40,000 a year on come back and within 2 years get rearrested. So that it doesn't work from just a crime prevention or a fiscally conservative standpoint. So this Back on Track program takes those folks and addresses some of the criminogenic needs that they have. They get the drug and alcohol treatment that they need, literacy training, they'll do community service, and most importantly, they'll learn a life skill, how to be a carpenter's assistant, an auto mechanic, something in the hospitality industry. And if they successfully complete the program, then they have no record. And only 5% of the people in this program in San Francisco fail the program. It only costs about $5,000 a year per person. So it makes sense. And then we can use our resources for those that are truly violent.
And we also and I'm just going to use it because sometimes people don't understand that we actually have a pilot program that we've been able to deal with. It is called RISE. It is part of that ever-expanding responsibility that I have. But we took a program that we started, that we came into, the MORE program, which was reentry office. We did not like the model, because the model really didn't show that people were getting jobs. So the focus has been, over the last 18 months, taking the people and rapid attachment to work, and then providing additional services for those people to help keep them out of recidivating again. We have a 4% recidivism rate. We've had over 500 people get jobs. And the bottom line is that it proves that if you end up making the investment, where did I get the money from? I diverted it from the prison. So, we're using that model. I would have loved to have used even more money that the commissioner was able to say, hey, look, we were able to save this money. And I said, yeah, let's invest it in the day reporting and even more employment programs and even more probation officers and even more programs that would actually work. And of course, we have a $150 million deficit in the city. And the budget director said, well, I need that money before you. The idea is that, yes, we know what works. We already have the model. The model works. It needs investment. But what it really needs is people in the community to stop continuing the stigma of a person being an ex-offender. If you don't give folks jobs, if employers refuse to say that you're going to allow what we do in the criminal justice, There is a 10-year period. Okay, you can actually figure out that you can use that in court to say that you can use that you've transgressed. But at a certain point, you gotta just say, give the person the chance that they need to prove that they can continue to walk the walk that you've now told them. That's what you've got to deal with. And I need employers to help us. I need the private sector to help us. And that's my begging everywhere I go. We can't do this just the city or the criminal justice partners trying to figure this out. We need the corporate folks to buy into the fact that you're going to give people a true second chance. And that's when we're going to make a difference in this situation.
All right, it's about time.
The time, let me
It's about-
just tag on just a little bit,
Well,
because we
I wanted
worked
to,
with
it's
that.
about time to wrap up, and there's one voice I wanted to get in
Oh,
before
go
we
ahead.
absolutely had to go. And that's going back to the issue of the high use of bail in courts. And Judge Dimby, it was asked of you, why is there such extremely high use of bail in Philadelphia? Is it a fear of political backlash, of not getting reelected? It seemed an important thing to touch on.
Hi. Part of the problem, I think, has been that we haven't had good research data about who to let out. We've kind of come to an agreement in the whole justice system where thou shalt not throw another justice partner under the bus, because that's the way we can keep working together. And all of us live in terror of the guy who is let out or whose case is dismissed, who shoots another cop. And so that's the thing we're terribly afraid of. I think Commissioner Ramsey, when this study was being put together, said you can let 1,000 guys out, but you better make sure it's the right 1,000 and not the 10 monsters. And I understand that Dr. Sherman from here at Penn is putting together a proposal. Hopefully somebody will fund it so that we can get some good data about who to let out. And we've done that already. We're way past differential probation, supervision, and stuff like that. We've done that. That's successful. We're starting to use that same data, offering that to judges in terms of sentencing. So, you know, we're on that bandwagon. So that's a big piece of it. But another big piece of it that I haven't heard talked about yet, and everybody here involved in the system will repeat it with me: housing.
Housing.
That's right.
Housing.
Absolutely.
Housing. They have no place to go to.
Absolutely.
We can't put them on electronic monitoring because there's no place to monitor them to. There's no place to supervise parole or probation. There's no place that you can use as an address so that the defenders and the private defense lawyers can get them into treatment or education. Housing, housing, housing.
Absolutely.
All right, well, I want to thank all of you for coming out this evening. I want to thank the distinguished panelists. It was wonderful to participate. You have a lot to think about. I'm sure this conversation will continue out into the hallway and for the days to come. So thank you yet again, and thank you to Pew for funding this really important study.
Okay.